I, for one, was really excited when I saw that Valentin Pentchev, who's from Indiana University, their network of science. Oh gosh, I should have looked up what this stood for. I just know where you're from. Anyway, IUNSI. He's been involved in several, I think, very interesting and kind of leading edge projects over the years. A lot of us will know him from Awesome with an O. He's here today to talk to us about CADRE, and you'll have to tell us how you like that acronym pronounced, the Collaborative Archive and Data Research Environment. And so I will turn it over to you, Valentin.
Thank you. I'm Valentin Pentchev, my full name is. Thank you very much for inviting me here. I hope everybody can hear me okay and see my slides. If not, please blink twice.
Everything's great.
Thank you. I'm new to this group, but I am a veteran of the Midwest Big Data Hub. I was there on the first charrette through the wild, wild west rules of engagement 3 years ago. We at the Network Science Institute were presiding over network science spoke when spokes were still a thing, and we're even participating in a data sciences ring of the Midwest Big Data Hub. I was recently elected on the steering committee of the Midwest Big Data Hub, and I'm one of the 3 co-PIs from IU for the new phase, which we are anxiously anticipating. What I want to talk to you about today is a different project called CADRE. That's how we were taught it can be pronounced. Collaborative Archive and Data Research Environment, which is the product of a project we received funding from the IMLS, Institute of Museum and Library Sciences, called Shared Big Data Gateway for Libraries. The reason we are discussing this, there is the dilemma against most of the libraries who cannot provide research with sustainable, standardized access to licensed data set, as well as freely available data sets out there. We have been experiencing this problem at Indiana University by ourselves, by the means of implementing the infrastructure and allowing our researchers who come from various different backgrounds to access this data. And we realized that for anybody outside of the R1 institutions, this is almost impossible. And even for the R1 folks, it is possible, but requires a very large investment in resources. That's how, by the way, we were able to convince him to go with us and created the CADRE, again, product of the Shared Big Data Hub. What it is, it's a cloud-based platform that will provide secure access to bibliometric, sociometric, and infometric, for now, data to a large body of university researchers. We are collaborating with the Big Ten Academic Alliance, and a lot of their members are funding the project. But the idea is to have an open tier as well for everyone out there, being in a research library, in a community college, or just interested public to be able to access to those resources. For the Big Ten and the rest of the R1 institutions, this provides a solution to the main problem of big data sets implementation and getting access to both licensed and open source data. And in CADRE, we also try to target, and I will speak more about this in a minute, various kinds of researchers with various levels and depths of understanding in computer technology in general. So there will be a graphical interface that will guide people through creation of the queries and exploratory of the data. A little bit more on the second point. When I came here at Indiana University in 2015, we were one of the few institutions who had purchased the data. And what was the original plan back then was data to be, this is the Web of Science data from then Thomson Reuters, now Clarivate. The original plan was for the data to be stored on a non-networked computer, which is changed to a basement wall, and have a sign-in and sign-out sheet. It took us about 3 years to create and convince the administration of the university that we can solve the technical challenge of creating a secure enclave on one of our conduit clusters, where the data can live and be accessed by researchers while still adhering to the vendor specifications. I've talked for a while. Are there any questions or anything that I can clarify before moving forward? Okay. A little bit about the project partners. We are IUNI, Indiana University Network Science Institute, with collaboration with the IU Libraries and the Big Ten Academic Alliance, BTAA. All of their members are on board with the project, and 9 out of the Big Ten, which are actually 14, have pledged monetary support, not only for the duration of the project, but for 3 years afterwards. The main reason for that is all those data sets are received in XML or JSON formats in a hard drive in the mail. And we argued in the project proposal successfully that it will be way cheaper for the big institutions to work with us in a consortia and membership model other than try to recreate it for themselves. We're also proud that this will be cheaper for the big institutions, and it will be possible for everyone else, because with rough estimates, it takes from $500,000 to $1 million on average to start accessing the data. We also have the support of 3 out of the 4 big data hubs. We are hoping that the 4th one will join us as well. And this is the beginning of a project that will hopefully span way beyond the initial few seeded data sets. Quickly, a few words about IUNI. We are what I call a unique startup, a cross-campus transdisciplinary institute inside of a big educational institution. They told me it's a startup when I came from California, where I was involved in multiple other startups, and I tried to keep for 4th year the startup culture alive at IUNI. Our mission is to strengthen the theories, methods, analytical tools, and practice of network science, but also to foster collaborative interdisciplinary approach of understanding the complex problems of our society. The startup culture and spirit is important because IUNI was formed intentionally outside of every school at IU. We don't have a dean, we don't fine for indirects, we don't issue degrees, and we don't have students. What we do have is, through projects like this, try to bring collaboration to people who care about network science in general. We have a team of IT professionals, which I manage. I'm the IT director of the institute. But we also have a team of research scientists who are free to choose their own research paths and who are intentionally kept in the same room with the IT staff, where all the noisy and messy ideas get bounced around and help us move forward. Few of the project goals. First, we set up a goal to understand user needs and expectations through a wild collection of user stories. The Product Ownership Council meetings, scheduled 2 for the entire project duration. One was just conducted in University of Chicago, in PTAA Commons in Chicago last weekend, and we came with a lot of interesting guidelines and as much communication as possible through meetings like this one. I've worked in IT for quite some time to know that the main drawback of many IT projects is people like me who like working with expensive shiny toys, build them, and then let researchers use whatever was built. We decided to take the opposite approach, and through research and through engaging the research community, trying to build especially what researchers are telling us they care about. So the constituencies of the project are people from informatics and computer science who care about application programming interfaces, notebooks, and access to raw data. These are usually folks who have labs of PhD students and postdocs at their disposal and need access to the data itself. There is also a big science of science community who, although not as versed and resourceful as the computer science folks, usually know how to access relational databases and cloud-native technologies and have very specific research questions to answer. And finally, our tertiary constituencies are research libraries, instructors, and the general public in general. What we have for all of them are three different approaches to the same data. For the first ones, access to the raw data in the form that it comes from Web of Science through Claravet or through Microsoft Academic Graph, through US patent data, and so on. This is XML, JSON, comma and tab separated files. We provide them access to dynamic schema and cloud native technologies like uSQL on Microsoft Azure side and Athena and Glue on AWS. And we allow them to spin their own Databricks Spark clusters using HD Insight or EMR. If those terms don't mean anything to you, they're intended for people who do this on a daily basis. For the second part, for the second type of a researcher, we are currently engaging the Research Data Commons Center here at IU for a research of the best database and data sets to answer specific queries. Since the creation and gathering of user stories showed us how different and heterogeneous the research is, we figured that different queries to those data sets would be best answered by different technologies. We plan and currently have in the enclave a relational database. We are bringing graph database and testing between few of those listed here, Neo4j, Tiger Graph, Agents Graph. And we also utilize the same cloud and serverless technologies mentioned above. And for people who don't know how to write SQL and Cypher queries, the main part of the project, or one of the main parts of the project, is a guided query building interface. The query builder, which is a web interface currently being processed, will allow researchers to generate and create their own queries, and also one very seldomly discussed part of it, being able to suggest the best technology. Of course, user will have control over it at any point, but our initial tests show that relational databases answer some queries marginally faster. Graph databases answer different kind of questions in a way better and more comprehensive methods. And some of the distributed computing and cloud native technologies are very useful in very small but specific data cases. To understand where I'm coming from, the relational database that currently works on a pretty big server in Indiana University was taking weeks to answer some queries that include multiple joins and creation of citation databases, to the point that we had to take into account the regular maintenance of the big machines here at IU to make sure that the queries will be able to finish. The same query in well-created distributed job on a cluster in a cloud takes usually about 40 to 50 minutes for the few weeks on a relational in-house data store. Another big part of the enclave or the shared big data access gateway is a federated login, which allows us, and this is already working and available to use, which allows us to pass authentication to the educational institutions themselves. This is first to make our life easier, but also to make sure we are able to restrict access to appropriate resources. Most of the Big Ten academic partners have now cleared and access to Web of Science data from Claravet Analytics. A few of them, however, have a little bit different requirements than the rest. Based on the federated login in the institution that answers the login request, we can figure out and further restrict who has access to what data sets. This is an enclave that includes proprietary data like the Web of Science and mixes it with open source data like the Microsoft Academic Graph, again, US patent data, few newspaper publications, MedNet records, and so on. The other big part is the Research Asset Commons, which has ability for people not only to run queries, create data sets, use tools, generate their own containers, but also share and save metadata, queries, results, visualizations, annotations, and so on. Again, through a granular security system, people will be allowed to save their own data so they can continue further, share data with the research who are part of their own group, share it with the entire organization, or again, vendor license permitting, open it to the world. This will ensure reproducibility, replicability, provenance, and transparency of the data, since every process and permutation is first very well documented, and second, DOIs are issued at every step data gets changed. This will allow for creation of publication and actually education packages that will be easily traced by a single link to the enclave or to the shared big data gateway, and have not only data, but all the tools and libraries required to work with it. If any one of you have tried to replicate data, data analysis using usually technologies that are a few years outdated, knows the complexity of making sure you have the exact system that the researcher had. The research asset commons with the unique identifiers will ensure that you do. You can trace every permutation and change to data that was made since the inception. And you can first use the tools published on your own data set, or vice versa, use your own tools on data sets that we already have. Yes, this is basically it in a very quick nutshell lightning talk, I guess. This is our main diagram and a few of the systems I already mentioned. The authenticated federated system, if you take a look, it includes a custom login. We are trying to incorporate Google, Microsoft, and Facebook accounts as well for those not part of educational institutions who still want to access a little bit limited but available free tier of the enclave. The research asset commons, where people will be able to share and save their data. The web query interfaces that will allow access to various resources and different kinds of database search. All the tools under the research asset common, which I don't have highlighted, which allow people to start either notebooks or labs, or through an API use their favorite programming tool to access the same data. And on the right side, I have to move my camera window here. As mentioned, we have the raw data format of the seeding data sets, the Web of Science, Microsoft Academic Graph, and USPTO data. And we hope to be able to increase this exponentially once we make it work with multiple data sets as well. This is the first question I get from every library that has seen the project. Can we include this data set as well? Can you put PubMed? We just got a request from the IU School of Music to process some really old musical scores and the ability to be able to search in Latin. All of this is being processed into multiple databases, again, relational and graph databases at this point, not to exclude any other future technology. Apologize, they're mowing the lawn next to me. And also in the future, allow access to the local institutional resources. That's the reason I have been following since the beginning and I'm very interested in the open storage network, because technologies like the open storage network will make available for institutions to use their own compute infrastructure and pull up and down those huge data sets. And I think this is it from me and the rest of the leadership. I want to thank you for the opportunity. And out there are a few ways to contact us. One last thing that I forgot to mention. This was just announced on the Product Owner Council. We're starting a CADRE fellowship program for anyone that is interested in using our datasets. You can go to cadre.iu.edu and find the fellowship program link. Please distribute this to your students and researchers who are interested. We will be getting access to preliminary data for all of our fellows, and we'll be also able to sponsor 6 of them, 6 teams, to come present with us at ISSI 2019 in Rome. We are doing a workshop and a tutorial, almost a full-day event to this very prestigious Infometrics conference in Italy in 2019.
Awesome.
This is all
Oh,
I
and
have.
that wasn't a pun.
Awesome is another project of ours.
Yes.
May I ask a question? This is Florence.
Sure, please.
This was a great presentation. So, you know, I work with, you know, Trusted CI at IU, and also with the Research SOC, the Research Security Operations Center. And one of the things we're looking at, because I work on accelerating cybersecurity research into practice, is getting data sets that the cybersecurity researchers need. And giving them access to those. So those are two different problems. One is actually finding people who can share cybersecurity related data, you know, who are willing to do that, static and dynamic, and then actually making it available. So is that something that would fit into your frame or not? Because when you say libraries, it would. Okay, that's interesting.
Now, as part of the project, it's a 2-year project, which we honestly believe we'll be able to keep working in perpetuity through the membership model. But for the 2-year of the project, we promised those 3 data sets that I mentioned before, and we'll have to deliver on those. The idea, however, is that this will pave the way of expanding the resource to multiple other data sets. And again, this is the first question I get. Everyone has a data set they want to share or at least make available to their users. And each of them, by the way, we've learned has their own challenges and requirements. So I'm sure the cybersecurity ones will be very different than the multi-open web of science. But I'm very open to taking a look if I can.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
This is Jay. Follow-up question from Florence. It's great presentation. Thank you. You mentioned about licensed data set.
Yes.
What do you mean by that in your context? I think this. I'm also thinking about cybersecurity data set. But what do you mean by license in your context?
Well, the Web of Science is a product distributed originally by Thomson Reuters, now Clarivate Analytics, and they just noticed they renamed themselves again to Web of Science Group. It costs a few $100,000 to have. And once you have it, again, you're delivered an XML hard drive, a hard drive with XML. So originally, we were one of the few institutions who have purchased it here at IU. And we knew about other labs at UIUC, at UC, and the rest who purchased their own copies. We had a conference with all of them and tried to open some sort of collaboration, and were stopped by the vendor who told us we cannot share data, although we have license to purchase those data sets. Then the BTAA, the Big Ten Academic Alliance, entered in a collective agreement with Clarivate to purchase the data to all of its members. And now we are allowed to share it. And what I mean, this is the licensed data set. So once you log on to CADRE, if you're a member of the Big Ten, you'll be able to access the licensed data set Web of Science. If not, we also have a free version of it, which is the Microsoft Academic Graph, that is an open data set and can be accessed by anyone.
Okay, thank you.
And we hope further to have even more granular security system that more companies can be part of the Web of Science, and data sets that are licensed by a certain lab in a university or multiple universities can be brought in as well.
Could I ask a question that's sort of related? You had a box in the diagram that was labeled, I think, granular permissions. How do you manage those permissions or granular data set permissions? So if I want access and I have rights to certain things, how do I communicate those rights, or how do you find them out?
Well, there are 2 types of rights. Most of them are what data sets you have access to. And currently, again, this is a very young project. It was supposed to start in September and actually started in January. Currently, we base this on the institution. We know that University of Iowa has access to the Web of Science. University of Iowa State, however, does not. So using the federated authenticated system, we pass the authentication tokens to the appropriate institution, get it back, and if you log on as part of IU or UI, you get access to the data. If you log on as part of UIC, you don't. A second level of permissions are when people are allowed to create their own teams and assign them to projects, and then share data with them. People in my lab, people in my university, or I want to share this with everyone. We allow users to do that. However, there is another check of, is there proprietary data which is not allowed to be shared? If anyone wants to make derivatives of their work based on Microsoft Academic Graph, which is an open resource public, we would allow this. If it would include Web of Science, we won't until further review by the vendor. Does it make sense?
It does make sense. Just one little follow-up. How do you define a team? Is that something that's an internal definition to this project, or?
Yes, it is an internal definition. So, and again, this is not there yet. This is planned to be there. But the idea is that I can invite people to join me, or I can add to my team people who are already part of CADRE.
Got it. Thank you.
So we would allow multiple people to be members of multiple teams that do not need to be limited to the same institution. If people are collaborating, they should be able to form teams which are cross-institution-wise.
Thanks.
Any other questions?
Well, thank you very much. I will share the link to the CADRE Fellowship in the chat. Please take a look and forward as much as you can. We need all information because, again, we have working proof of concepts that we demoed. By the way, the link I will share will have another link to the recorded video demonstration we did a few days ago. But this is a 2-year project in its infancy that we are shaping along, hopefully by the feedback of the researchers who use this data.
Super. Well, I know I'll be following up with you, and I'm sure you're connected to Melissa already on the OSN. So when we're able to help, we look forward to connecting with you on that. And I will definitely let people know about your fellowships. I think that would be very sought after. But yes, one final, just thank you again, Val, for your presentation and for taking time on a Friday afternoon. I know that was really interesting, and we appreciate your time.
Thank you all, and thanks for your support.